You are listening to Beyond the Wheel, a podcast about the people and ideas that drive the RV community forward.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Driver's Edition. Sean and I are back. This is actually our last episode for the year. So if you're listening to this before or after Christmas, we want to wish you a happy new year. And we're just going to jump into this episode. So this is going to be your typical Driver's Edition where we're going to bring up some news, things that are going on in the industry, the state of the industry, sales, and things like that. But we wanted to kind of start out just slightly a little different before we jump into a lot of the news and the numbers of RVs selling. And we wanted to talk a little bit about battle-born batteries because recently they've been, I would say, the talk of the town is the term I would use. I've been seeing a lot of posts on Facebook and videos. I've actually had at least 2 people reach out to me personally and text me and ask me my opinion of what's going on. And this all started from a YouTube video. Somebody put out a YouTube video saying that battle-born batteries are dangerous. So we thought maybe we would just kind of address this topic and talk about things from our side of things and our experience with the company and our battery-born experience. How's that
Yeah,
sound,
I
Sean?
guess. Yeah, that's good. That's good, Kenny. I guess the first thing is like just a disclosure that Battleborn was an early and longtime sponsor of the podcast. So we just want to disclose that if you don't know. But we currently don't receive any funds from them. Kenny and I both have Battleborn batteries in our RVs. So I just want to make that clear up front. But with that said, speaking as a scientist, because that is my other life, is a real health scientist. So I know about the scientific method and stuff. I'm not sure what all the uproar is about based on the video. It was one individual testing 1 or 2 batteries, and the battery was taken apart. And that's not how any of us use the batteries. And it also may cause some structural changes in the battery. And then in addition, there was another video that also showed that there could be some loss in the amps during the cycling. But since it was one battery and non-scientific, it's pretty much anecdotal, which means it's just one person's opinion. There was no scientific rigor that you can apply to that one test. So none of the work done was based on real scientific analysis. And I think before people get too excited and talk about ditching the batteries and class action lawsuits like I've seen in the comments and in other posts, it would be good to have some actual scientific evidence of a definite problem with the batteries. And I guess also based on a cursory, also non-scientific review, there have not been any reports that we could find of damage to an RV from a battle-born battery problem. So in my opinion, again, as a scientist, all of the other influencers who are jumping on this bandwagon and making it seem like something that is a definite and proven fact should be ashamed of themselves, I think. The logical step is to have an independent certified laboratory test to see if any of these problems can be reproduced. And until then, I couldn't say that there's anything wrong with the batteries based on, one video with one single battery that wasn't configured how we use it and one person's non-scientific testing.
Yeah. I guess I'll swing the other way, Sean, because I'm only one person as well doing my own just personal testing in the sense that, I've just had the batteries in my RV for a long time. And the messages that I was receiving, like the people that reached out to me and texted me and said, are you worried now that you have this battery in your RV based off of this video? And they sent me a link to the video. And I was like, I'm not worried about anything. I said, I've had the battery in my RV for almost 7 years and I put 150,000 miles on my RV in all types of weather conditions, hot up to, over 100 degrees, as cold as 15 to 8 degrees. Actually, 8 degrees was the coldest I've ever been in. And I've been down forest roads and washboard roads and tons of uneven roads. Actually, I was on the worst road ever just a week ago, chattered my teeth for an hour down this road. And I have never, ever had any issues with any of my Battleborn batteries, not even for a second. So I'm not concerned. I'm like, if these batteries weren't proven, I think I just proved it myself that they are in a sense. I just think it's funny, like you said, Sean, all these influencers are now kind of jumping on this bandwagon and making these videos. And I see people in the comments talking, like you had mentioned, about like a class action lawsuit. And I'm like, well, for the last 10 years, nobody's ever had a problem. So now why all of a sudden, just based off of a video, is everybody turning so quickly against them? Like, just seemed very odd to me. The whole scenario seems really weird that you're going to throw away, okay, 10 years of these batteries being perfectly fine to now all of a sudden you think there's a problem. I've even seen some people mention that they are thinking about removing their batteries. I'm like, why would you do that if you haven't had a problem in the last 5 years with your batteries? Why all of a sudden do you think you would have a problem? It just, the mindset to me is very odd, I guess you could say.
Yeah, we have this thing with social media. I think it's called rage culture, where
Mm,
people have to be outraged about something and protest against something. And I think that's probably what's going on here. Not to say that the video didn't show that there might be a problem, but again, it would take like scientific testing, using a real scientific method to evaluate that. And you can't make a proven theory out of one person's YouTube video. I
yeah.
mean, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that was just something that we wanted to talk about. Like Sean said, we do both have Battleborn batteries, so we are talking from our own experience. They were an early sponsor for us. They haven't sponsored us in a little while, and we just want to be transparent in the sense that
Mhm,
you guys do know that one time they did sponsor us. So we're not here to defend them in any way, although it might sound like we're defending them. We're just
mhm.
kind of chatting about our own experience with the company. Battleborn, nobody reached out to us and asked us to say anything positive or negative about them. This was just something that we actually came up with yesterday and said, hey, while we record tomorrow, maybe we should talk about this because everybody else is talking about it. We might
Mm.
as well talk about it too. That's all we're going to say about that for now. But now we can jump into the rest of the episode. We're really going to focus into the last quarter, especially now being the end of the year, and talk about your buying experience, the overall consumer buying experience, numbers. And you know what, Sean? The numbers still to me look more than satisfactory. I keep waiting for like the Florida dropout and numbers to start to come down because we're not even in the camping season anymore right now.
No.
The weather across the country is getting cooler. People are not really camping as much at this moment, and yet numbers still look good. September 25,600 units were sold. October 30,200 units sold. And then November 21,000. So just last month. But that would be expected to me. Camping season is coming to an end. It's winding down. But I thought that 30,000 in October was really good. So ballpark number there for the last quarter is 77,000 RVs shipped. Now they're wholesale numbers. They're not retail sales, but it shows that, to me anyway, that the production is still very steady. It's not aggressive, but it's steady. And maybe, those sales, they're kind of showing that the manufacturers are not overbuilding. They're building to what they feel is needed, which is probably a smart move.
Yeah. Yeah. What this doesn't tell us, the process is the manufacturers make the units, then they sell them at some price to the
Mhm.
dealers, and then the dealers sell them at some price to the consumers. And I wonder if those prices from manufacturer to dealer and dealer to consumer are shrinking in terms of profitability. Like, are they selling them for less than they would have to keep these numbers as high as they are?
Yeah, I think that's for sure what is happening. I don't want to name names or anything like that, but I do talk to a lot of different dealerships across the country because I do a lot of work with shows and stuff like that. And they are definitely selling at a smaller margin of profit than they were. This is what they've all been telling me. Like you said, Sean, just to keep the numbers going. But they're still selling and they're still
Yeah.
they're still making a profit. Now they did tell me, most of them are telling me that they will maybe lose money on one particular style RV and hope to make it up in another one. So, in other words, like maybe a Class A motorhome, they're not going to make the big profit that they used to. Maybe they're just breaking even and they just hope to make that revenue back up on maybe a sale of, say, a towable where they have a little bit more play. And I also want to point out, those numbers at 77,000 is slightly higher than what the sales were last year. The numbers are still working in the industry's favor, but I also believe that they are working in the consumer's favor because there are better deals. When I'm talking to the dealers and they're mentioning, smaller margins of profit, that means that that should be meaning that you are still able to wheel and deal a little bit at the dealership. And then a little bit later in the episode, we're going to tell you, like, when you're shopping for an RV, which ones are selling a little better than others, which ones maybe you won't have as much negotiating power depending on the style of RV.
Yeah, and you found, Kenny, that the full year forecast is between 330 and 340,000 units or RVs sold, which is pretty good.
That's really good. Yeah. And I will say it's probably a small gear or cog in this whole formula of why maybe we're still holding steady. And that's part of, I think, the overland market. The overlanding market is growing incredibly fast. I know you're going to say, well, the overland market isn't the RV market, but they're starting to bleed together. These last overland shows that I just worked last year, I did 5 of them. Each one of them seemed to introduce more and more RV manufacturers.
Mhm.
Typically, it's only been Winnebago as far as like the mainstream legacy types of companies. But now I'm starting to see Thor and I'm starting to see Airstream at these overland shows where I never saw them before. So I believe the two, I don't know if you would call it brands, but the two markets are starting to bleed together a little bit.
Yeah, and I am seeing a lot of smaller towable types on the roads than I used to. Like, I can't remember the name of the company. They were bought out anyway, Kenny, but they had like the cricket and the teddy bear, the
Taxa.
woolly bear. Yeah,
Yep.
taxa.
Yep. Yep.
They I see a lot those size out on the road these days. So
Yeah, I see a lot, maybe not pop-ups, but I see like those A-framers. I also see a lot of small, like the Woolly Bear version, other brands making something similar to that, where it's not necessarily a bed inside, but it's like a rooftop tent. I've been seeing a lot of vehicles like that. And maybe it's because I'm off-road a lot, but I see them just being towed often. So I think the trend is still heading towards like that smaller RV. I think people are looking less at the big traditional style, like a Super C and a Class A, and are leaning into the smaller RVs. Well, and I feel like, that the thing is with those smaller RVs is that you get more use out of them. They're easier to take out, they're easier to store. You can almost daily drive them. You just get kind of more bang for your buck as far as usability goes. You're going to be able to use that more often than a Class A. You're not going to take a Class A or a Super C down to the supermarket just to do your grocery shopping. But hey, you might hop in your Class B van and take that to the supermarket and load stuff into the fridge and drive back. It's got plenty of cargo capacity and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that market is still leaning towards smaller is better for RVs.
yeah, I agree with that 100%.
When you are at the dealers, you've probably heard us saying this before, the buyers are still there. They're still selling RVs. Buyers are still buying the RVs, but they are asking more questions. And this is what we recommend you do also. Like when you're at the dealership, don't let them pressure you. Like RV manufacturers are still producing these RVs. If you do not buy that day, you will still be able to buy that RV tomorrow. Somebody else will have that RV. Don't feel pressured to buy right away. Ask your questions. We are seeing that the facts are that people are walking away more often at the dealership and saying, hey, I want to think about this. It's a big decision. Interest rates are still high. This is going to cost me a lot of money over time. What we're finding is that the buyer is comparing value over some of the features and maybe the pushiness of a salesman. Man, it's so easy to get attached to a floor plan or a look of something. This is also why I always recommend having a third party inspector because they're not all that emotionally attached to a vehicle like you would be. You can convince yourself of things that maybe you don't really need and overlook other things. I think it's good to always go with a friend and somebody that's not even really interested in RVing so that you can talk to somebody that maybe is not all on board about purchasing something. Because if you turn this purchase into an emotional purchase and not, just looking at the facts, looking at the numbers, looking at the deals, shopping on RV Trader to see if maybe somebody's got the same unit for a better price, that don't make an impulse buy is, I guess, what we're saying. There's no reason to now compared to a few years ago when, yeah, you probably, if you really wanted that unit, you had to buy it right there and then because there was a good chance that they were not going to be able to get you another one. That's not the case anymore. With that last quarter number being 77,000 RVs shipped, there's another one.
The other thing to consider is that there may still be some older inventory on the lot that you can get a
Mhm.
better deal on. So, like maybe as the 2026s roll out, there's plenty of 2025 still left on dealer lots that they're trying desperately to get rid of. So you can hopefully get a better deal on those if you go and you don't need the newest, shiniest thing. Just if you want new, take one that's new, but last year's model.
Yeah, definitely look for last year's model and new because this is something I didn't realize, Sean, is that the dealerships typically don't flat out own the inventory that they're selling. They're usually financing that inventory from the manufacturer. Like they purchased it, but they're financing it so that they don't put the money up front. Like they're, if they got a $100,000 motorhome and they sell 10 of them, they didn't just buy them each for 100,000 outright. They are actually doing payments just like the consumer would. So if the longer that RV is on the lot, the faster they're going to want to get rid of it because they're making payments on this thing, the more they kind of own it themselves.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
they
That's a
want to
great
turn that
point.
over. Yeah, they want to turn it over quickly so that they're not making payments on it anymore. And then that's more profit for them. The longer they're on the lot for, will encourage them to want to negotiate with you to get it off of their lot, which is something I've never heard before. Like I always knew, they always want to move obviously inventory off their lot. But I've always heard it was just so that they could bring new inventory in. I didn't know that they were making payments on these RVs all this time that they're sitting there. I just figured, well, it's taking up space. It's stopping new inventory from coming in, which is true too. But the fact that they're paying monthly on these things, yeah, I could see why they would want to get rid of something that's been sitting there for 5 months. They might have been paying 10 grand a month on that thing.
Yeah. Definitely look at the older models and see if there's something that you like because you can get a much better deal on it. Like Kenny said, they want to see it gone because they're paying for that thing every month it sits on the lot.
And I wonder too, Sean, like how their interest rates are. So if they're making payments on them, as our interest rates go up, I'm guessing their interest rates go up as well. But maybe they could be fixed though. Okay, hey, I'm going to buy 10 of these at this rate, at this interest rate, and maybe that's what it is. And maybe that doesn't fluctuate. I would think that wouldn't fluctuate for them until they made their next purchase.
Yeah, I would have to think that they get some sort of discount rate because they're buying multiples RVs and not like us just buying one.
Yeah. Also, too, like when you're talking to the salesman, I always make salespeople seem so dishonest. But if a sales guy is giving you a great deal, it's not. I shouldn't maybe say this on air, but it's probably not just out of like the goodness of their heart or generosity. It's just a math problem for them. Like they need to move it. They're not really trying to help you out. It's a win-win situation, right? You got a better deal and they move some inventory. It's not them just being like generous that day.
Yeah, they're definitely not losing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all just comes down to, giant math problems for them. Hey, we got this X amount of vehicles on the lot charging us X amount per month in payments. Let's pick a few of these and get them out of here. Let's make a good deal on some of these and get them out of here.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
funny. That's true.
yeah, I think it's true. Yeah, I think it's true. And I've talked to salespeople all the time, and it's funny. There's great salespeople, and I'm not saying it's great as far as they sell a lot. Great that they are very honest. They're very upfront. And then I've worked with other salespeople that I'm like, they seem like like your typical salesperson. So when you're shopping around for a vehicle, maybe shop around for a sales guy too or a sales girl. Like make sure that you get a good vibe from that salesperson. They're not all pushy. I've talked to some salespeople that are incredibly knowledgeable, and I've talked to some that don't really seem to know all that much either. So, when you're shopping for an RV, you're kind of shopping for the salesperson too. I feel like, you got to find somebody that you like. Personally, I like somebody who's kind of like no nonsense, as transparent as they possibly can be, and just don't push me. If I want to buy it, I'll buy it. Try to push me into buying something, type of thing. And there's plenty of good salespersons out there, salespeople out there. But we'll also talk a little bit. We wanted to touch on the fact like what is selling and what is moving a little slower. Class C motorhomes still seem to be what buyers want. I know I mentioned vans earlier, but the Class Cs are really popular right now. They're manageable in size. You can get a Class C as small as a 20-footer, which makes it easy to drive. It's got storage in it. It's got a real bed, a real bathroom. So, some nice features over a van. Not that a van doesn't have these things, but van is typically don't have your wet bath. A van is also going to have maybe a sleeping area that converts into your living space. But with a Class C, typically these things are fixed. You'll get a true dry bath. You'll get a true bed that is just fixed for your bed, and you don't get storage. So the Class C still continues to be a really good seller. So if you're shopping for a Class C, expect to have a more difficult time, I would say, with your negotiating, because the dealer knows, well, if you don't buy this, I probably will be able to sell it. They're not going to probably wheel and deal with you compared to a Class A. So a little bit more difficult to drive, takes up more space for storage, takes up more space on your own property. Usually you need a tow vehicle to go with it. So cost-wise, Class A's going to be a little bit more expensive. So Class A's right now are moving very slowly off the lot. So expect more wiggle room and more negotiating power when talking to somebody about selling their Class A compared to their Class C.
Yeah, I just had a friend or somebody that used to work with me many, many years ago reach out, and I talked to you about it too, Kenny, but they're interested in starting to RV, and they're pretty much set on a Class C because of those reasons. So, yeah, it was interesting to hear why they wanted a Class C versus a Class A and versus a towable. And like you said, the Class C seems to be the best right now for those reasons.
Yeah, I think the Class C is the sweet spot. So, like, if you're in a Class B van and you're thinking of upsizing and you want to get a little bit more space, I think it's easy to fall into a Class C. You get a little bit more space, you get that storage, and it's still easy to maneuver and still easy to drive. And then coming from it into the other direction, say you're in a Class A or a big fifth wheel and you want to downsize, well, I think that's the Class C again, because you're going to keep a little bit of that storage. You're going to increase your drivability to what you have currently, but you're not going so far down to a van where you have to think about, oh, well, now I got to get rid of stuff and what's staying and what's going. I really think that Class C in the market right now is really the sweet spot because they make so many vehicles fall under a Class C now. Like, it used to be just your traditional Class C and it has the eyebrow, and that might not be a look for everybody. Now the Class C looks a little bit more modern. You still make everybody still makes that traditional Class C, but now they're making them look a little bit more sleeker. They're building actually on a van-based platform and then giving it flare outs and bump outs. Whereas, the traditional one is built more on the truck body. So now that there's just more options for a Class C than ever before too, more designs, more innovation going into the Class Cs. So it makes them very, very appealing. It's given competition to the bigger vehicles and the smaller vehicles that really wasn't there before.
Yeah, and you can also find it for a reasonable price
Mm-hmm.
to very luxurious. So
Yeah.
it
Wide
fits
range.
all price ranges.
Yeah, very wide range. And, saying all that, people will still like what they like. Like I am still a big fan of Class A's. I've had my motorhome, our Class A, since 2017. Our next motorhome will probably be a Class A again. Like we do like, this is what we've come accustomed to. We have huge storage. huge cargo capacity for our water tanks. And we're very familiar with the trade-offs of, not having that easy drivability, having to hook up a car every time. So we're kind of used to it. So maybe that works in our favor because when we go to buy a new vehicle and it's a Class A, maybe we'll get a good deal on one. Everything's trade-offs. Everything in the RV world is trade-offs.
Yeah, I guess the other thing too is the gas mileage. Sometimes you get
Hmm.
better gas mileage in a Class
Yeah.
C than you would a Class A.
Those Class Cs get surprisingly good gas mileage. In my motorhome, I get about 8 miles per gallon in my Class A. Class C, they're easily getting 15 miles per gallon. So just about double, and that will go a long way. That's a lot of adventures down the road. We also wanted to talk about, the market. You mentioned tax actually, Sean, and that it's not, it still kept the name, but they were actually bought by Storyteller. That's something that is very common in the RV manufacturing, right? Thor owns a ton of companies. Thor actually owns Airstream. Winnebago owns Newmar. Both these companies own other companies as well. I'm just giving you a couple of examples, but something that I don't really hear happening too often is really dealerships buying other dealerships, not for the bigger companies anyway. Like Lazy Days is I've always thought of Lazy Days as being a huge dealership nationwide. The one down in Florida is enormous. They even got like campgrounds attached to them. So really like a very established dealership. They are no longer around now. Like Lazy Days was bought by Camping World and they were also bought by Campers Inn. So if you have a Lazy Days near you and it still says Lazy Days outside, that probably won't be the case for very long as they have now all been purchased by these two other companies. It started with Camping World, and I think we reported about this, when Camping World was buying them. We had thought, and we mentioned this online, that they would probably sell completely because at the time, Camping World only bought a portion of them and they were going to continue to operate as Lazy Days, the ones that weren't purchased. And we said, well, I wonder if they'll wind up selling them all or maybe somebody else buying them. And that's exactly what happened. So Camping World started to buy them and then Campers Inn came in and bought the rest. So March was the time that Camping World had finished. They purchased 5 of the Lazy Day dealerships. Elkhart, one was in Wisconsin, Tennessee, Vancouver, and Arizona. And they were supposed to purchase more, but for whatever reason, Camping World, I think they were going to purchase 2 more, and Camping World said, "Yeah, you know what? We're good with these 5. We don't want the other 2." So then Campers Inn came in actually just a few months ago, really not that long ago. And they came in and said, you know what, we're going to buy the rest of these Lazy Days that are out across the country. So that really expanded Campers Inn. Campers Inn is a dealership that I really only see talked about or see them at all when I'm at the Hershey show. I don't feel like I typically see them on the road when I'm driving around, but now because of their purchase of the remaining Lazy Days, they actually have 51 locations. Most likely, as I'm driving around, I'm probably going to start seeing more of these Campers Inns, I guess.
Yeah. One thing I was thinking about, Kenny, with this Lazy Days sale is the KOA in Tucson. I think it's called the Tucson Lazy Days KOA. I wonder if they're going to change their name.
I think they would have to, unless the Lazy Days name is now up for grabs, because it's kind of a fun name, right? Just Lazy Days. So you could have a KOA, lazy, just part of their branding maybe, but I bet you that's going to change. It might have already changed. When will be the next time I go through Tucson? I'll try to take a look and see what it says out there. Because I would say KOA Lazy Days sounds more fun than KOA Campers Inn. I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. Lazy Days just has that. I always thought Lazy Days in Florida was the perfect, like just have some Lazy Days in Florida, and, hanging out by a pool type of thing. I thought it was a great name. So I'm surprised that these companies, I'm surprised they absorbed the name and changed the name. Like when Thor bought Airstream, they didn't change the name of Airstream to Thor. They kept that name. When Winnebago bought Newmar, they didn't absorb that, they didn't take the Newmar name away. They kept the name. So I'm surprised like Camping World and Campers Inn didn't do the same. I'm surprised they didn't buy them and then just keep on running them as a Lazy Days. And maybe there was some type of rule, like maybe that was in Lazy Days description, like when they were selling them, maybe they didn't want the companies to have the names. And maybe they actually kept the name for themselves for a future date. And if that's the
Yeah.
case, then definitely the KOAs don't have to change their name.
We bought our first RV at the Lazy Days outside of Tampa. I think it's in
Hmm.
Sefner, Florida. We really like that place. Like you said, they had a campground,
Hmm.
tons of lot space for RVs. They had dining inside. It was a great location.
Yeah, they have a cool restaurant there. So I wonder if they will keep everything. Will they keep the campground there? Will they keep that restaurant there? They'll probably make some changes to it because Camping World is so big. Like you can have a good or bad experience depending on where you are and what part of the country. But generally, Camping World doesn't get the best reputation. Maybe in their case, maybe they should have kept the Lazy Days name instead of renaming it a Camping World. I wonder if that was something that was talked about. I wonder if they thought about, hey, maybe we should, and maybe Lazy Days said, no, you can't have the name. We're going to keep ownership of the name. Like I said, maybe they're planning on doing something with it later on.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. Yeah, and I wanna drive by that Lazy Days outside of, Tampa and see what it is. We're gonna be down that way in February, so maybe I'll just make a
Oh, yeah.
trip, drive
Okay.
down there and see.
Yeah, and I'm actually taking a drive to Tucson later this week. So yeah, I'll swing by that Lazy Days and see if that has switched over to a Campers Inn, and I'll take a look and see if the KOA also says Campers Inn now. And then talking about shopping, getting back on shopping for a minute, and when you're looking at vehicles and the new RVs, I would say that I am starting to see a slight trend that RV dealerships or RV manufacturers are trying to win newer consumers. I think the fabrics that they're using are getting to be better than they used to be. I actually have in my notes here showing that like the neutral color palettes. I'm not sure if that's 100%. It's funny. I think it just depends on the manufacturer. Some of them I go in and they're very neutral. To me, almost too neutral. And their pitch is that you can kind of accent it yourself. Like, we're picking a neutral color so that you can throw any type of color pillows in here and any color. I kind of like, I'm older, I guess. And now maybe I'm even having an old school mentality. But I have a lot of wood colors in my RV, and I think it makes it feel kind of homey. Whereas some of these more neutral colors inside, not 100% convinced. And I know that's been the trend for at least 5 years are these more neutral colors. I'm just wondering if that's, I guess that's here to stay. I guess that's the trend that we're going to continue to go down. If you guys are listening, let us know, write to us and say, do you like this neutral color palette that you're seeing in some of the newer RVs, or would you like to see a couple more bold colors? I know Winnebago messes around with colors every once in a while. Like if you go into an Echo, it could be like green inside. Some of them are yellow inside. Like they use some pretty bold colors. And I never get any negative feedback from that. Like I don't think anybody's ever walked into an Echo and be like, oh, why is it so I'll use the word loud. Like, why is it so loud in here? Like, it is not doing neutral colors. But then, they'll do neutral colors in some of their other floor plans. So I just wonder, what does the consumer want to see? Is neutral better because you can accent it the way you want, and it's kind of just maybe more pleasing on a wider scale? Whereas if you do like a wood color, some people might want a dark wood, some might want a light wood. But if you just do a neutral, and when I say neutral, it's like a grayish white color seems to be like the newer interior styles.
See, I like the, more modern, sterile look of them.
Mm.
So, yeah, I think it is up to the individual.
Yeah, and I guess by going with that as your base, like I said, you could bring in louder colors if you wanted to, and it's not really going to clash with a gray. You could throw a little bit of blue and pinks, purples, whatever you wanted inside for your bed sheet and stuff like that. So maybe there's something to it. So yeah, definitely write to us and let us know. Would you like to see manufacturers going with more outlandish colors on the inside and styling, or are you happy that they are just doing a more, I want to say bland, neutral. I guess just a more neutral color, and you kind of make it your own, I guess, from there. And then also when you're shopping around, I think it's important to look past those colors, look past the glitz and the glamour or the neutral colors nowadays and pay attention to, we always tell you, look at your cargo capacity, look at your storage. I always say, and I don't hear too many other people say this, like, somebody might be promoting an RV that has a ton of storage and it can hold yada, yada, yada. But sometimes they'll put like a very small exterior door. So even though the storage is large, the doorway to get something in, like you're not going to be able to fit your bike through it. So make sure like the doors are nice and large too to match that storage capacity that an RV has. Like maybe it has pass through storage, but the door is so small you wouldn't be able to pass something through. Or if you could, it's uncomfortable for you to kind of like bend down and get through it. So keep those things in mind too.
Kenny, on our fifth wheel, we have pass through storage, but on one side, the door is like a double door, and the other side, the door is like a half door. So you have to be strategic in what you're putting at what end because you can't actually pass everything through.
It's an in and out side.
Yeah.
In and out one side, but maybe get something through the other side too, depending on what it is. Yeah, so just pay attention to that kind of stuff too, like when you're shopping around. And be careful too. Like I know the manufacturers really want to go heavy on tech. Just think about too, like what breaks and what doesn't break. Take a look at build quality when you can. And again, I'm going to come back and say a third party inspector is really the way to go, especially nowadays because these RVs are getting more and more advanced. Power systems are way more advanced today than when we were originally shopping, Sean. We didn't even have a choice of lithium when we shop. But now that's almost becoming a standard. Like lithium is in everything. Monitoring your tanks and stuff like that is very different today than before. It's now going to digital where you can even monitor. I mean, some devices you can monitor right from your phone. Whereas before everything was like built into the rig itself. I would say there's probably a little less guesswork nowadays than it used to be. But yeah, mentioning the phone, like some RVs are now coming with apps, like they're app-based controls and you can control slides and jacks, everything from your phone, temperature from your phone.
It's not RV related, but it is tech related. I was installing something the other day, an extender for our house for our Wi Fi. And in order to set it up, you had to have the app, which is great when your cell phone works. But if you break your cell phone or lose your cell phone or whatever, a lot of these things that require an app, you're kind of screwed.
Yep, I got the same thing, Sean. I got an extender. Actually, we haven't used ours in a little while, so I went to try to set it up like you said, and it's all done through the app. I can't remember my password, and now I'm locked out of it. Passwords are my nemesis. But yeah, you're right. Something like that. And hopefully that's something that the RV manufacturers are thinking about, redundancy. I think people still want switches. So just because you have a screen that controls all your lights and your tanks and your slides, I still think people would want a physical switch or more than one screen. Like if you don't put everything in a screen, give me a second screen or be able to let me work it on my phone too. So that there's some type of backup, some type of redundancy. Don't let me go out camping and I got my slides out and then I can't bring anything in because the screen cracked or something like that. And now I'm stuck. So hopefully the manufacturers are thinking about that when they're moving along and advancing the products.
I think that covers everything we were going to talk about, Kenny.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think the market is still pretty stable. It's not like it was a few years ago. It's not actually. It's slower compared to what it was a few years ago, but it's still staying steady. It's actually up from last year, which still surprises me all the time.
Yeah, me too.
Um, I think if you're out there shopping for an RV, you still hold the power for the most part. Like we said, on a Class C, maybe not as much, but you still have a lot of ability there. They still want to move those units too. They're just not going to give you the same type of great deal on maybe a different style RV, but they're still there too. So I would say there's deals to be made on all the RVs right now. And I think we're going to continue to see more advancement in the RV industry. I think the idea that there are new, fresh buyers for the market means that the manufacturers are going to want to impress them. I think they're going to want to show them, hey, you know what? This isn't your grandfather's lifestyle anymore. This can be
Mhm.
for a younger, more hip. I don't even think hip's a word anymore, Sean. That's how old I am. More hip crowd. This is for everybody. This is for younger generations and older generations. So I think they're going to be pushing innovations, tech, and just overall experiences. Of course, we want to hear from you. Let us know what you think of these the interior colors. What do you think about the tech? What do you think about what Sean said about having a device that you have to have on your screen, we definitely want to hear from you. What do you like that's coming out right now in the RV market? What are you excited about maybe coming down out in the future? Maybe it's EVs, maybe it's just self-propelling travel trailers that they are working on now. So, yeah, let us know what you think.
Yeah, and we want to thank everybody for listening, and we really appreciate hearing from you. So, like Kenny said, please do let us know. And we'll be back in a couple weeks with a new episode. But before we go, I just wanted to plug Kenny's book one more time. If you're looking for late gifts, late holiday gifts, or if you have birthdays for nieces, nephews, grandkids, or your own kids coming up, consider Bell's RV Adventures as a good gift. We bought a few copies of it just to give out as gifts to our grandkids. So we really enjoyed the book, and Kenny did a great job. So I just want to make sure people are paying attention and are checking out that book. So thanks, everybody. And until we talk to you again, safe travels.